So what should you do, right? So you're in this space, you want to do accidental restart, but you don't know what to buy. So I'm going to give kind of a, here's a kind of rough graph of what some of your options are. So we have some things down here that I've talked about that I wouldn't recommend for the reasons we just discussed, but there is still a very inexpensive option. If you have a straightforward piece of equipment and you have the capacity and the expertise to do some simple wiring just to replace a switch, a $20 switch that is UL 508 recognized can be installed in a piece of machinery. So that's one of those things that this does not have to be expensive. Now, and these kinds of things, I mean, you can buy that on Amazon. They are designed for that purpose. You buy a $5,000 jet bandsaw, it has that exact switch in it. And so these are things that you can do that are inexpensive, that there's no reason not to do on like all tools and machinery in your facility. Now, as you kind of move up the road, right, you get things that have anti-restart that are kind of in line. There are some places that a momentary foot switch can be considered both anti-restart and sometimes as kind of an e-stop replacement. OSHA has some code clarifications where they talk about specifically pipe threaders and how having because it's sometimes hard to do controls because they're directional and it can get a little more complicated. They've allowed things like a momentary foot switch to be considered as a way to disconnect and things like that. So could apply to you. There's also these kind of UL 508A control boxes. They're kind of the Lincoln Log Lego version of a way to get anti-restart that we talked about and e-stop, right? We haven't talked about e-stop a lot. Depending on interpretation, it can be required or not required, but it is something that I would argue is good to have everywhere. And then and these are available from every manufacturer you can imagine. You go to on a Stronghold, a Gardemation, a Rockford Systems, they all sell their own flavor of this, right? Not super expensive. And that, as I mentioned, would be anti-restart and e-stop. You have products like ours, right? And so ours is also in that kind of plug and play category, right? You just plug it in, and for ours, you would get the anti-restart, the e-stop. You also get motor braking, which is kind of new, right? I'll plug that a little later. And then, of course, you can build a custom control cabinet, and you can make that do anything you want. Sky's the limit. And so there's this kind of huge spectrum. And as you're shopping, you want to be looking for, is it listed by a recognized, or is it listed by a nationally recognized test lab, right, for that purpose? You also, of course, want to check the voltage and current and horsepower requirements, what you need. And then you say, is it something that we have the expertise to install ourselves? We're willing to rewire something. Okay, you can put in a magnetic switch, right? Super inexpensive. You'd rather have something that's plug and play. You just plug it in, right? You're back up in this territory in the kind of with these control boxes or one of our products. Or you have other needs. And this is where when you have those other kinds of energy we were talking about, right? Maybe you have something pneumatic. There's more complication than it's a simple kind of on-off piece of machinery. You really start wanting to get into these custom control cabinets, which on their own, if you're doing everything above board, means that you would likely hire someone. They will use all test lab recognized components, and they will install them and arrange them in a agreed on way by the test labs, and then that what's called a panel shop actually has approval from test labs. It's called UL 508A to basically say, hey, we took all these recognized parts, installed them in an agreed on way, and we put a sticker on it saying that this whole thing, this whole control cabinet is now itself a listed assembly, right? We could go into the test labs at another time. But as with all safety things, as for anything on here, once you install it, you test it, right? That's huge. So once you actually say, these are our requirements for what this controls have to do, you install it, and then you go down that list and say, does it reset automatically, does it start the machine when we reset the e-stop? It better not, right? Test it and see. People make mistakes. I was helping with an injury study recently where it was a large press break, and what they found, or what we suspect happened based on the information, is that there was a strange race condition, meaning that like two outcomes are possible, where if someone was depressing a pedal when they pressed the safety switch, there was a it was a game of chance on whether the safety switch would work or not. And that was an oversight by an engineer at some point. We're all imperfect. And so that's why you really want to be testing those things. So I see a question in the chat about how would you know if a product is UL 508? That's a great question. So you would know because literally on the product, there will be a mark for UL. It would be a little UL with a circle. If it is a listed product, it means it's like a full assembly that is safe to install. If it was CSA, it would be the little CSA with kind of the half thing. I have some links back in the presentation, which we'll share, that has all the different marks. And right next to that, it'll have one of two things. If it's a listed product, it will actually say the standard that it's listed under it. And it'll normally have the number and the description. And then secondly, it will also have a license number or their kind of certification number. And that's all public. So part of this I learn, right? So I see a product and I say, that's interesting. And I just look up that number. And on the UL website, you can see all these particular products are listed for these particular uses, and it gives you all the information you'd ever want. Or ask around, ask someone that knows. That's always a good way to go too.